Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video you will be seeing how I made this super cute macaron cake stand. I'm going to be using Jesmonite to make the macarons, but I'm also going to be showing you an affordable alternative for making those large white tiers which do use quite a lot. So I'm going to save you a lot of money today by showing you a really affordable alternative to Jesmonite. I'm going to be casting the 3 trays of my cake stand in these round silicone moulds. They came in a set of 3. I think it was just a set of 3. If it was a set of 4, I've lost one. And they're just for baking cakes in, and they work perfectly for making the trays of the cake stand. I wanted to keep it nice and simple, but you can buy moulds which are made just for making cake stands, and they've got a hole in the middle already, and they're good, but I didn't want the fancy edges that you get with those. Before I pour anything into these moulds, I need to work out how I'm going to have a hole in the middle of each one and how it's going to be connected to the steel rod that's going to go through it. And I had a cunning plan. I'm going to place 2 nuts and a washer in the middle of each mould. And they need to be glued together so that they stay together inside the mould while the plaster is being poured in. And so what I'm doing is screwing them onto a bolt, just a spare M6 bolt. Everything's M6, which means 6mm. So everything goes together. So I'm putting the 2 nuts on and then the washer, and I've made sure that they're all screwed on and fit snugly together. And I'm just going to hold them all together with a little bit of hot glue from my glue gun. The reason I've used 2 nuts and a washer is because that's the height that I want my trays for my cake stand to be. So if I do that for each one, I know, and pour the plaster up to the top of the nut, I will know that they're all exactly the same height. So that's why I chose to use 2 nuts. So once the glue is set, I just took it off that spare bolt, which came in really handy in this project, and all I needed to do next was block the hole with some blue tack. And once you've finished, you need to repeat that so that you have one for each of the moulds. The little bit of blue tack that's left exposed will help it to stick to the mould a little bit to keep it in place, but obviously it's not really going to stick to the silicone very well. So just be careful when you're pouring in your plaster to make sure it doesn't move, and if it does, just pop it back into the middle again. Before you begin filling your moulds, you need to ensure that your work surface is completely level. To make my trays, I'm going to be using stone cast plaster. It's like plaster of Paris, but it's a lot stronger. As the name suggests, it does set like stone. Eventually, it's quite a slow process. You need to leave it about a week or so to really dry out. And it's a 2-to-1 mix. So I've got 600 grams of water and 1.2 kilograms of powder. You always add the powder to the water and not the other way around. And then it all needs mixing up. Now, the figures I've just told you are my revised figures, the correct figures. What you can actually see me doing is making not enough. So yeah, I didn't quite make enough, but the figures I've just told you are the correct figures. And I'm just mixing it all up. And it's best to do it about half and half. Give it a good mix, then put the rest in. And what I like to do is get my hand in there and give it a good squidge around, because you can't always tell when you're stirring whether you've got rid of all the lumps. So as long as you've got a glove on, you can put your hand in there and really give it a squish around and feel to see if it's nice and smooth, and I've got to say, I quite enjoy doing that. Now you can pour in your plaster mixture up to the height of the top of the bulbs, and you will know that they're all going to be exactly the same thickness. And once you've finished pouring, give your table a bit of a bang, give them a bit of a move around just to agitate them and get rid of any trapped air pockets and bubbles that you might find in there. So yeah, usually banging the table works best, but I didn't want to bang it too much because my camera was on on the tripod on the table and everything just shakes, but I tried my best. So stone cast plaster sets in about 40 minutes, sometimes a bit less, and it would be ready to demould at that time. But like I said before, really, it might look a little bit uneven, the finish to it, until it's completely dry. It does take a long time to completely dry out. If money were no object, I would use Jesmonite or Hydroflow for this, but there is a massive difference in price, and Jesmonite and Hydroflow are beautiful products and they take colour really well, and that would be the main reason I would use them, for the way they take colour. But because these are just white, I'm going for the cheap option, even though it means waiting a long time for them to completely dry out. It's time for demoulding. When you demould them, if you're using stone cast, do be careful because they don't, even though it's set and it's ready to demould, it hasn't reached its full strength yet. It really needs a little while before it's its full strength, like stone. It's not like stone at the moment, so I'm being quite gentle. I will put the link in my storefront, in my UK storefront for this stone cast powder. I haven't been able to find it in America or Canada for my other two storefronts, but don't worry, because I think I found a good alternative, or two good alternatives in America and Canada, which I will put in those storefronts. But I will say now, I haven't tried them, but from reading about them, it's the same kind of thing. It's like plaster, but it's a lot stronger. And I can't think of the names of them at the moment, but if you look in my video description and follow the links to my storefronts, you will see the alternative options I have found for you there. But like I say, don't blame me if it's not brilliant. I haven't tried it, but I just think it will be just as good. Next, I poked out the blue tack which was blocking the holes, and it was time to clean up the backs, because even though you can see lovely polished tops where the plaster was next to the silicone, the back is never as neat as the front. Now, the best way that I've found for smoothing out the underside of these trays is to use a blade. I've got a tissue blade. That's just its name. I don't know why it's called a tissue blade. Maybe because it's so thin, I don't know. But it's a little bit like the blades you get for craft knives, when you can replace them yourselves. It's a bit like those, but those are sharper. So if you're going to use one of those, be careful. And you just hold it flat against the surface and almost like stroke the surface with the blade, and it just smooths it out really nicely. So I would highly recommend doing it that way rather than using sandpaper. You can use sandpaper, but this is so much easier. This works best just after demoulding while it's still quite soft. Now, in an ideal situation, I would leave these now for 2 weeks to completely dry out before sealing them. But because, same old situation as usual, I'm in the middle of making the video and I don't want to wait that long to get the video finished. So I'm skipping that, which I shouldn't really, and I'm sealing them now. And what I've got here is some beeswax. Actually, it's not beeswax, I don't think. Wax and oil for butcher's blocks, and it says in the description when I bought it, it says it's suitable for stone as well, so I was hoping that it would work for this, and it seems to work really well. So it's food safe because it's completely 100% natural, and so that's what I decided to use, and I will put a link to that in my storefronts too. So you just rub it on in a circular motion and leave it for about half an hour and then buff to make it shine. But I would probably recommend repeating this 2 or 3 times to give it a really good layer. Now, I did conduct an experiment. I've just done it literally about 15 minutes ago. I went to check the results, and what I did was I put some jam and some peanut butter straight onto one of the trays, not one of my finished ones, a spare one that I had, which I'd used the wax on. And I wanted to see if it would wipe off, and it stained it. I'm going to be completely honest with you. So, whilst this stuff is food safe, I would recommend using doilies or parchment underneath the food that you're putting on to protect the tray from staining. Okay, I purchased some feet for the bottom of my tray and found out that the way that I did it wasn't the best way. So whilst you're watching this, don't take too much notice and you'll just have to listen instead. What I discovered was the best way to do it is to screw in the feet when the plaster is still in the mould and it's still warm and it's only just cured. It's really soft at that stage, and you can screw them in without any pilot holes. But because I did it at this stage that you're seeing here, I had to make pilot holes, and it was all a little bit scary, to be honest. I was scared that it was all going to crack doing it that way. So yeah, I would highly recommend doing it while the plaster's still warm, just after curing. And I would also recommend using 6 feet for stability instead of the 4 that you can see here. You live and you learn, and often I live and I learn whilst filming it. So yeah, sorry about that. I recently saw a video on Claire's Crafty Corner which just had me blown away. I was completely inspired. And in the video, Claire made some macarons using Jesmonite and a silicone mould which she had bought. Claire got really great results using that mould, but the only thing about it was one mould for one whole macaron. So you didn't mould it in parts, it was just one solid macaron that you got from it, which I think might cause a little bit of difficulty in knowing when to stop pouring and then when to put your next layer in and then when to start your next layer, if you get what I mean. So, because I'm impatient and because I wanted to do it slightly differently, I made my own mould. But I will leave the link to Claire's video in the video description here, and you can see her links and find out where she got her mould from if you would prefer to buy the mould that she used. I made the 3 parts of my macaron using polymer clay and baked them in the oven. And then once that was done, I used them to make a mould. I haven't gone through the whole process of showing how I made the mould because I've done other videos on that, and there's lots of videos for mould making on the internet. It's very simple. I just wanted to show you my basic pieces that I used to make my mould. And here is the mould. I used Jesmonite AC100 to make all the macarons in this video. You could also use Hydroflow, which is very similar. Jesmonite is a 2-part casting compound, and so unlike the stone cast I used before, this one comes with the liquid and the powder. It's kind of an acrylic polymer that you mix with the powder instead of using water, and it makes a slightly different result. The mixing ratio is 1 part water to 2.5 parts powder. I had to think then. So I used 26 grams of the liquid and 65 grams of the powder and mixed it up just like I did with the stone cast before. If you wanted to, you could use the stone cast, which we used for the trays, to make the macarons, but there are a few differences. Jesmonite takes pigment a lot better and the colour in the finished piece is a lot more uniform, whereas if you were using stone cast you can use the same pigments but you would need to use more to get the same result, and it can tend to be a bit patchy as well. So it doesn't take colour as well as this Jesmonite. So that's one of the reasons why I use the Jesmonite. But the other reason is that I've found the stone cast powder, the plaster, anything you make from it won't glue to anything else. 2 pieces of stone casting, I'm struggling with my words. They won't glue together very easily. I know you're supposed to be able to use PVA glue. I've done all my research, but I haven't had much success with it. And I wanted to glue these pieces of macaron together. So that's the main reason why I used Jesmonite. Jesmonite glues very, very well. Right, back to my mixing for my macaron. I have used Jesmonite pigments, not the actual proper ones. I got the cheap version from eBay because that's me all over. I'm a proper Yorkshire lass. If I can find something cheaper, I will. So I've just got the cheap version and they work great, absolutely fine. I've used a little bit of yellow and a little bit of orange to that yellow just to richen it up a bit because I wanted a warm yellow. And yeah, that's it really. And I repeated the process in all different shades for, I think I made 7. I think the cake stand needed 7 macarons altogether. So yeah, it was just a case of repeating the process. Okay, it's after 25 to 30 minutes they were ready to come out of the mould, and they come out nice and easily. And as you can see, you get a lovely uniform colour and a really good finish with the Jesmonite. And I was really happy with them. I think they almost look real. So yeah, they come out lovely. The next thing I needed to do was sand them, because anything that you use a mould for, you're going to get a ridge around the top. Just around the edges you get a little bit of a ridge, and I needed everything to be completely flat so it would sandwich together and glue together to make a nice seamless finished piece. Now you're going to need a hole through the centre of each macaron, and you could glue it all together first and then drill the hole. That way the holes, they're going to line up really well, but I actually prefer to drill the holes in each piece separately and then glue it together. I've made the hole bigger than it needs to be, and that way there's not too much of a problem if the holes don't quite line up, and the post that I'm putting in the middle will still go through all the holes. It's best to start drilling from the outside of the macaron, because when it comes out through the other side it sometimes damages as it exits the macaron. So yeah, you get a much cleaner finish if you start from the correct side and then the inside. It doesn't matter if it's damaged, does it? So yeah, that's why I did that. To glue the Jesmonite pieces together, I've found that 2-part epoxy glue works best. I'm using the Gorilla brand here, but I have to say, as I pushed it out, the 2 parts didn't come out evenly, and I had to mess about with it a little bit to get them to come out evenly, so I wasn't really happy with that one. I have found that I get better results using the Araldite one. So I just thought I'd mention that. So once you've squeezed out your 2 parts, just mix it all together and glue all your pieces together, and it's as simple as that. The macaron, which is going to be at the very top, will also be a handle. And the cake stand is actually very heavy, as you can imagine, so the handle needs to be strong. It also needs to be able to screw onto the top of the post. So I'm putting a rivet nut into the top piece of my final macaron. And to suspend that rivet nut, I've just got that piece of cardboard which I've put a hole through, and I'm putting the M6 rivet nut onto the end of the bolt, and I will just hang it over the mould, and that way it won't, I'm blocking it as well there, look, with the blue tack again. So that way, by suspending it, it won't be touching the mould and you won't see the top of it when the Jesmonite is poured in. Once that was set, it was ready to come out of the mould, and that bolt just screwed out of the top of the macaron, and it was ready to piece together just in the same way that we did all the other ones. Obviously, you need to drill a hole in the bottom of the macaron and the inner section, which I had already made. I already had a spare inner section, so that's why I didn't make one with this blue macaron. So once it's all glued together, just in the same way as before with the two-part epoxy, you can use the wax and oil that I used for the trays for the stand on the macarons. All of the macarons need to be coated and sealed with that wax, and then it's all ready to put together. All the pieces will be screwed onto this 30cm M6 threaded rod. It's a steel rod and it's really strong and it holds them all together perfectly. So it needs no more explanation, so I'll just leave you to watch it. So that brings me to the end of my cake stand journey. I learned a lot along the way. I made quite a few mistakes and I found my way around them. So hopefully, if you wanted to make something like this, I may have saved you from making some of the same mistakes yourself. My husband is a patisserie chef, and before this cake stand was even completed, I'd been commissioned to make 2 of these for the cafe where he works. And so this one is in the cafe's colour scheme, and I think it's turned out really great with the writing on the trays. What do you think? So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video and I hope I've inspired you to have a go yourself. If you haven't already subscribed and you like what I do, please consider doing so and don't forget to give it the thumbs up. And I will see you again soon. Bye for now.